Thank you. Again, my name is Hyoung Shin, and I represent Korea Polar Research Institute. I cannot resist the temptation of adding some of my personal thoughts and reflections. When the Antarctic Treaty was signed and entered into force, it was a very different time. Like Sputnik, artificial satellite, and suspicion, aggression, rivalry among major global powers. It was just Cold War time. But now, and there was no like UN Convention on Law of Sea, BBNJ treaty, and there was, I don't think we had words like climate change or climate crisis at the time. Now we're in very different time. So it's only proper and appropriate to ask, so what is the relevance or utility of the Antarctic Treaty now? And also for Korea, at the time, Korea was a very small economy, poor country. I'm not quite as old as Antarctic Treaty, but only some years short, so not too far off, fairly close though. So Korea was a very small economy, but now in 2025, Korea is one of the largest investors in Antarctic research. So for us to be part of the and partner of the Antarctic community was something big, and it was part of joining the global community. So we ask ourselves, what should Korea be doing to be trustworthy partners and contributing partners? So that was the basic, well, kind of intent of this panel one. And we have people who are very prominent. Each panelist will say 7 minutes without PPT, and then we will just talk very casually and freely. First, we have Evan. Evan Bloom has been the US lead for Antarctic diplomacy from 2006 until 2020. He has been frequent to ATCM and CAMLA, all the things. And then we have Gino Casassa, director of Instituto Antarcico Chileno, Chile, one of the original signatories to the treaty. And he will say, he offers some original signatory perspective and maybe his own country's contribution. Stephen, what else do I have to say about him? Former president of SCAR, and he has been active over many decades in Antarctic research and environmental conservation. And we have two people from a local host, Sabina. Sabina is a technologist, Institute of Polar Science, and National Council of Research in Italy. And Marco Volpe, PhD candidate, studying in Finland. And these two will say a few things about their Antarctic research, mostly centered around Terra Nova Bay and in Rossi sector, but from different perspectives. So may I ask Evan to begin?
Well, Dr. Shin, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I recognize many of the people in the room, friends and longtime colleagues in the Antarctic Treaty System. So that's rather nice to come to Milan and be with familiar people. I particularly want to thank Dr. Shin and Professor Shibata for bringing this all together. I know how difficult it is to make all of those arrangements from other cities and to do all of that. So thank you very much for this effort, because I think it's very helpful to provide education about the treaty system so that people can understand what's going on. So I've been asked to talk about how does the Antarctic Treaty System work with other major treaties, and how can it work collaboratively with those treaties. Now, many of the people here have considerable expertise in the Antarctic Treaty System and related instruments. And I realized as I started to go through this that as one talks about the relationship to other, I have a background as a lawyer, to talk about the different organizations, there's a tendency to use a huge amount of acronyms and all of that kind of thing. And that becomes kind of dull very quickly. I don't think I can really avoid all of that in this. So I don't know, if I look up and people have completely lost consciousness, I'll know that I've just gone too far with all of that. So I'm going to focus on three basic questions. What are the other relevant treaties? How does the treaty system now work with them? And how can the treaty system collaborate further with them, with particular attention to the High Seas Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty? And in the final part, I'll explain why I think that the BBNJ may have only limited influence on the Antarctic Treaty System. So the Antarctic Treaty System is a set of interrelated treaties and binding decisions taken under those treaties. It's a legal framework that handles governance of the Antarctic region. The Antarctic Treaty was signed by 12 countries in 1959, close to the time of Hyoung Chul's birthday, but not quite the same, and has gained legitimacy because, for the most part, countries that have an active interest in Antarctica are all represented. Now, as you know, the main three main treaties under the Antarctic Treaty System are the Antarctic Treaty, Environmental Protocol, and the Camelar Convention. Antarctic Treaty and Camelar have somewhat different memberships, but overlap substantially, and have different parties that have decision-making rights. Consultative parties in the case of the Antarctic Treaty, and commission members in the case of Camelar. And the treaties provide that any member of the United Nations can accede to them. So geographically, the Antarctica is covered by the Antarctic Treaty, which is south of 60 degrees south latitude, and then some additional areas are added north of that for Camelar to reflect where the fish go north from Antarctica. So I'm not, let's see. There are a lot of multilateral international treaties, some of which directly relate to Antarctica. And two aspects I'd like to focus on are what treaties apply in Antarctica beyond Antarctic Treaty System instruments, and second, how do those treaties or their secretariats interface with the Antarctic Treaty System, notably the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting and Camelar. So I'm not going to do a comprehensive survey of law applicable to Antarctica, don't worry. But let me mention a few examples. So UN Convention on Law of the Sea is a key example, and it governs maritime issues in the maritime space. The International Maritime Organization is a UN specialized agency and gives rise to a series of treaties such as the Marine Pollution Convention and Safety of Life at Sea Convention. On the initiative of the ATCM, the International Maritime Organization in 1990 designated Antarctic waters a special area where the adoption of special mandatory methods for the prevention of sea pollution is required under the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships. See, it isn't even much better if I read out the whole thing or just use the acronym, sorry. So the Polar Code also applies to Antarctica. Other relevant UN agencies relevant to Antarctica include the Food and Agricultural Organization and ICAO, which does aviation. And then there's the DOALOS, the Secretariat at the UN Division for Ocean Affairs at the UN that interfaces as well. There's the International Hydrographic Organization. Now, the Convention on Biological Diversity does not regulate within Antarctica, but it can establish policies having an impact there. Thus, the Kunming-Montreal framework, which calls for coverage for protection of 30% of the global ocean by 2030, includes the Southern Ocean. Thus, CBD parties will follow that commitment even though it isn't legally binding. And even non-CBD parties sometimes take on that commitment. An example of that was the US in the last administration. This administration is another story. UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, Whaling Convention, they apply as well. So how does the Antarctic Treaty System work with these? The ATCM invites representatives from IHO, IMO, UNEP, UN Framework Convention, ICAO, and WMO. CAMLR invites, among others, the Agreement on the Conservation of Albatrosses and Petrels, the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, the National Whaling Commission, and CIOFA, the Southern Indian Ocean Fisheries Agreement. Now, I take the time to mention all of those because it gives a sense of the direct connection between the particular meetings, such as the ATCM here, and CAMLR, and these other organizations. These can cooperate with the Antarctic Treaty System, especially via the two secretariats, the CAMLR and Antarctic Treaty Secretariats in Hobart and Buenos Aires, respectively. In addition, parties to the Antarctic Treaty System can and do bring relevant aspects of implementation of these various treaties into their Antarctic diplomatic activities. So how can there be further collaboration? Now, a lot of collaboration actually does take place. That collaboration, in my experience, is more fruitful when it focuses on particular issues that receive attention both within the treaty system and outside. Thus, there are often synergies when scientists work together, and that is certainly the case when the CEP or the CAMLR or the CAMLR Scientific Committee make use of contacts with scientists who are part of these relevant organizations. And I'd be interested to know what Dr. Shin thinks about those interactions. SCAR, the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, isn't a treaty organization, but its scientists are keenly involved in Antarctic treaty work. When the ATCM focuses on climate change, the work of the IPCC is relevant. CAMLR Scientific Committee benefits from ocean and fisheries scientists and other frameworks. Thus, my recommendations for further collaboration is for the secretariats and chairs of CEP and SC CAMLR to think about what sort of technical information is needed in particular terms from other organizations, and to see what they'd like to recommend to parties. Science aside, it's clear, for example, that the CAMLR Secretariat needs to be informed about what is going on in FAO, for example, as both focus on fisheries management. Now, last set of remarks will focus on BBNJ, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. This new treaty was adopted by the UN on June 19, 2023. It is an implementing agreement under UNCLOS and focuses on issues including area-based management, area-based management terms and marine genetic resources, and will enter into force when 60 countries ratify. As of last week, when I last checked, I think it was 50 had done so out of 136 that have signed. Thus, entry into force could be relatively soon. Now, BBNJ applies only to marine areas beyond national jurisdiction. Hence, if an area is within national jurisdiction, the treaty has no jurisdiction. The text itself has a lot about cooperation between BBNJ's efforts and those of relevant regional organization. In fact, that's a key element of the treaty. And as the Southern Ocean makes up about 10% of the entire ocean, it's a place where BBNJ is quite relevant. But there are some problems with how BBNJ applies to Antarctica. The first involves territorial claims. As I mentioned, the treaty can't apply to any area within national jurisdiction. Now, there are 7 countries with territorial claims, and these, for the most part, also claim maritime zones from the land that they claim. For most countries that don't recognize the claims, the maritime claims are invalid as maritime claims flow under law of the sea from land. So no right to land, no right to maritime space. That would be the US position. Thus, some countries will claim that certain areas 200 nautical miles from the Antarctic continent are not covered by BBNJ. This is a particular problem for marine genetic resources, which require benefit sharing if covered by the treaty. But there's another problem which also relates to the claims, and I've written about this. The final text contains provisions purportedly insisted on by China that may be interpreted as rendering the treaty inoperable when it is applied to the South China Sea. The provisions at issue concern claims to sovereignty and related disputes, ensuring that the COP decisions or establishment of protected areas shall not be relied upon as a basis of asserting or denying any claims of sovereignty, etc. Now, this language is particularly opaque, but given the importance reportedly placed by China in securing these words in the final hours of the negotiations, it seems reasonable to conclude that China, and possibly other states, believe that the treaty cannot create MPAs or cover marine genetic resources in areas such as the South China Sea that are subject to marine disputes. And of course, the Southern Ocean is subject to marine disputes. The second involves how BBNJ relates to regional organizations like CAMLR when it comes to area-based management tools. Under Article 22, it provides that the COP may, where proposed measures are within the competence of other global, regional, sub-regional, sectoral bodies, make recommendations to parties. And it cannot undermine relevant legal instruments, etc. This approach is weaker than what was proposed earlier during some of the negotiations for BBNJ, where if a competent body didn't act, the COP could step in. Now, since CAMLR is certainly competent to establish marine protected areas, in effect ABMTs, and has done so, it means that CAMLR would have, in effect, full jurisdiction with respect to the Southern Ocean. So as a result, I don't see BBNJ as having much impact within the CAMLR Convention area. However, the COP can influence policy globally and perhaps send some recommendations to CAMLR, which for there to be any action, it would have to find consensus within CAMLR to respond. So I apologize for taking a bit too much time, but thank you very much for your attention.
Right. He contained so much information in his... Let's go on to Gino first. Then we will do a round of discussion and question, maybe, afterwards.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, the co-organizers and conveners of this meeting, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Um, the title of my few words is Strengthening of the Antarctic Treaty System in Coming Decades from Our Perspective in Chile, as one of the, as was said earlier, 12 original signatory countries. So we have taken in Chile a lead role together with the other signatory countries, of course, in the main negotiations of the Antarctic Treaty System. And we have stressed that ratifying all the instruments is, which of course is by consensus, is the key to the survival and the operation of this unique treaty, and we strongly promote this. And this includes the environmental protocol, the yet to be ratified Annex 6 of the environmental protocol, which regulates insurance and environmental damage, what to do in those cases. So we are one of the, I forget exactly how many countries have ratified, but we're part of these 20 or so countries that have ratified, but still there's a few countries that have not ratified. So we strongly urge all other countries to ratify this, signatory countries. And we have fostered the, encouraged the participation of other South American countries, and Argentina and Chile are the original signatory countries, but we have 4 more countries that have subsequently joined the Antarctic Treaty as consultative members, namely Uruguay, Peru, Ecuador, and Brazil. And Colombia is applying. Venezuela as well is applying to SCAR at the beginning. But in this sense, I'd like to mention there's an annual meeting similar to COMNAP. COMNAP is the logistics branch, let's say, of the Antarctic national operators, and we have a South American chapter where we invite as well the non-signatory members. So typically Colombia, Venezuela are there as well. So it's all our countries meet once a year. Last year it was in Brasilia. And this year it will be in Punta Arenas and Puerto Williams. So we are closely organized and sharing logistic efforts and sharing science as well. So that's something very practical we have done over the years. And the other big step forward has been to reinforce our national legislation to comply with the Antarctic Treaty System. And we have, our lawmakers have actually agreed to this law, and it has been implemented. And it has 9 regulations, of which about half of them are active at the moment, including permits for science, permits for tourism, for non-governmental activities, such as logistics and installation of satellite antennas for cell phone 5G has been implemented in at least one of the stations, and another one will be implemented soon. So, and trying to bring together the international law and to comply with the national law as well. So a major effort has been done by our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where we are part as well. We are a sort of semi-autonomous institute within our national foreign ministry. And we deal with the science, but the politics is dealt with by the Division of Antarctic Affairs. So we strongly promote the entry into force of these agreements, as I said, towards the continuing the preservation of Antarctica, as the treaty rightly says. The pillars are peace, science, and as a pristine environment. And three more issues I want to just mention quickly. We at the Chilean Antarctic Institute, we are promoting strongly gender equality and also early career scientists. And we are doing so in our scientific calls, which are normally funded through our Ministry of Science. So we specifically are including requirements of co-investigators in these two conditions, as I said, gender equality and early career scientists. And on the other hand, we are very actively pursuing improving our environmental protocols for our scientific stations. We have 3 traditional scientific stations from our armed forces who are actually doing most of the logistics in the Antarctic Peninsula and the South Shetlands. But our institute has we have our own since this year, and we're very glad to start this permanent station, Escudero, on King George Island, and we have plans for renewing our facilities and working at the moment with the German international agency, GIZ, for a green hydrogen plant as a pilot study in the pilot plant in the future. In terms, of course, in addition, of course, to wind energy and solar. So these are the main points I wanted to bring forward. Thanks again.
Yes, we learned that Chile has strived to, for example, strengthening national legislation to back up to support Antarctic Treaty, and also adopting many measures and actions to bring some of the values, key values, in their scientific operations, such as gender equality, early career fostering, and more reinforced environmental standards and things. That's very good to know. Okay, now can we go to Stephen, please?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Shin, Professor Shibata, our local hosts, for arranging today's meeting. I'm going to talk to you about science. So the treaty sets Antarctica aside for peace and for science. Do we know what we mean by science? And that's the subject of the short time I have to you today, recognizing that it's far too short to cover all of it. Essentially, it's a way of knowing. It's not the only way of knowing, but it is an unusual way of knowing. It builds ideas about the world based on previous ideas, in effect, conjecture, thoughts about how the world should work or does work. Science then uses evidence from observations, from models, and from thought, especially mathematical thought, to test those conjectures. Does how we think about the world fit with what we then look at the world to do? And refutation is a really important part of it. Sadly, very many people forget that no is the commonest word in science. And that enables us to understand what yes actually means. So how do those ideas work? And science does this through a loop that also sometimes seeks more inclusive explanations. If you can capture more with an idea, the idea is considered more powerful and more appropriate. Science is intensely collaborative, and of course that sets the foundation for the interactions we have in the Antarctic. But it's also worth remembering that it can succeed through the endeavors of single individuals. Individuals who then sometimes find themselves unusually in the spotlight. Science leads to understanding, which then guides our interactions in the world. As a simple non-Antarctic example, think of well-tested drugs, such as penicillin. We know what they do through science, and we then know how to fix problems that we may have medically using penicillin or related antibiotic drugs. Science can also make predictions about aspects that are very far away. We can have planetary predictions of their motions for decades and decades and decades into the future, quite straightforwardly. Importantly, its predictions also offer ways to think about alternative actions we may take now and what those actions may lead to into the future. And all of you will be familiar with those in the setting of the shared socio-economic pathways that explore what we do with society now and its impacts into the future on our climate and on the Antarctic system. So essentially, science provides a guide, an evidence-based guide to decisions. But these decisions are based on multiple factors, including the goals and viewpoints of different societies that are brought to consensus through a negotiated process. Science never reaches a final, ultimate truth, a full stop. It simply doesn't. Therefore, it cannot be held as a pretext to stop decision-making while waiting for more science. What we do is we use the best available evidence to inform our decisions. And we're all used to doing this. I think we all have a good idea of risk and uncertainty because for the most part, we all have to buy insurance. Science flourishes best in open societies and settings where it is enabled even when it reaches inconvenient or unpalatable conclusions. And we know that this is becoming increasingly difficult. But the Antarctic provides a setting where this is done in a spectacular way. Science also flourishes best, as made clear by the speakers already, with a diversity of ideas. And a diversity of ideas come from diversity. Gender, culture, approach, traditional, modern, unusual. Science has delivered an extraordinary base for good decisions about Antarctica's future, which is so central to ours. And we have seen a wealth of good decisions come out of the Antarctic Treaty System. Of course, this importance to civil society is also important for us to set out. We have to not only make good decisions based on evidence, but also convey those to the public. And it's quite simple to do at times. And I have to say, and I apologize in advance to the organizers, I brought a prop. I always bring props to talks, and it's simple to do. So there are a few of these props which I'm happy to share. So that, Chair, is, in my view, the role of science, a foundational one, an important one, but not the only one.
Well, this is a lot. There is a lot to discuss about. Imperfect science should not be a reason to defer decision making forever. Well, we all know that. But, well, this has become a problem. Everybody knows that. Okay, now why don't we turn to our Italian colleagues? Maybe with a real-life case of Terra Nova Bay, perhaps, yes?
Good afternoon, and I'm really honored to be here, and thanks to the organizer, Dr. Shin, Professor Shibata, and also the local hosts. And I would like to share some reflection on how Italy is actively shaping its approach in response to the rapidly evolving operational and scientific landscape in the Ross Sea area, especially. This perspective is informed by Italy's 4 decades of experience in this crucial region. When Italy joined the Antarctic Treaty back in 1981 and subsequently established the National Antarctic Research Program, PNRA, in 1985, operation commenced in the Ross Sea and Victoria Land area. At the time, only the United States and New Zealand were active in the region, with the primary operational center located approximately 200 kilometers south of our Mario Zucchelli station. A consistent seasonal cycle of sea ice near the coast provided Italian researchers with ample opportunity to develop their contributions and scientific credibility without significant external pressure. Furthermore, through logistic and scientific cooperation with other Ross Sea stakeholders, we were able to expand our activities across the entire Ross Sea. In the mid-1990s, collaboration with French Polar Program facilitated the expansion of operation and scientific endeavors to the summit of the East Antarctic Plateau, culminating in the construction of Concordia Station, which was completed in 2005. Presently, due to climate change, the seasonal behavior of ice pack around our station has become increasingly unpredictable, leading to significant operational implications. These environmental pressure coincide with substantial shift in operational and scientific dynamics within the Ross Sea and Victoria Land areas. Since 2014, COPRI has been operating a permanent station just 8 kilometers north of Mario Zucchelli. Concurrently, German also has begun utilizing the summer station Gondwana. Finally, the establishment of China Qingling Station on an accessible island in February 2024, located 25 kilometers south of Mario Zucchelli Station, represents a profound change in the Ross area's operational landscape. Our current strategic positioning reflects a mature understanding that science diplomacy necessitates both openness and strategic awareness, all while navigating increasingly complex partnerships and consistently upholding scientific integrity. The central challenge we all face in this area is how to integrate both established and new actors into cohesive scientific and logistical frameworks, especially in an increasingly polarized world, without overlooking the escalating pressure rising from climate change. Considering this observation, the starting point for addressing this pressure and challenges lies in our scientific priorities. Advancing marine research in the Ross Sea, particularly following its designation as the world's largest marine protected area. Consolidating long-term observation through Italian monitoring stations. Enhancing the multinational character of Concordia Station toward its evolution into a true European research base. Beyond scientific endeavors, we must also address creating synergies to reduce operational costs in an increasingly crowded Terra Nova Bay, ensuring operational continuity in the face of climate change, which includes developing land-based runways, increasing our environmental sustainability footprint, an effort that also advances our scientific objectives. Based on these scientific and operational strategies, priorities, we can actively work to organize focused workshops involving all the partners in this area, all the scientists that work in this area, to address specific scientific questions in Terra Nova Bay. Establish working groups on logistical coordination and environmental management. Build trust through small-scale collaborative projects and first. Leverage initial success to invite broader participation, including American and New Zealand partners. The creation of a Terra Nova Bay hub or something like that acknowledges the geographical proximity of Korean and Chinese bases to Zucchelli Station offers a practical focal point for cooperation. This approach represents a sustainable long-term strategy. The national Italian program has always been fundamentally a scientific program, and by maintaining this core identity, it is well positioned to promote scientific diplomacy initiatives without compromising research integrity. As the geopolitical environment grows more complex, scientific collaboration becomes even more crucial as a bridge between nations. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, now, well, that makes even more curious what Marco has to say. Let's hear from him.
Thank you, first of all, Professor Shibata and Dr. Shin, for involving me in this process. It has been a pleasure to actually help facilitating the organization of this seminar, and I hope it will be fruitful for all of us here. So, yeah, I will maybe elaborate more on the presence of scientists and scientific research in Terra Nova Bay, focusing on how the actors that are active in the region can actually improve cooperation, and what kind of research has been done in the last years, and how scientific research has been actually growing within the region. We know, well, most of the people here know that because of the scientific relevance of Terra Nova Bay, there has been a proliferation of research facilities and scientific activities in the region through two main systems that I would like to stress on today, which are research stations and Antarctic Special Protected Areas, ASPAS. And by examining these 2 points, I would like to elaborate a bit more on how would be beneficial perhaps and to open the debate about how can actually national programs can be harmonized better to actually strengthen research cooperation, and how science is produced within the systems of ASPAS, which I think they have an expressed potential in terms of research cooperation. I'm not a scientist, so I've tried to read some literature about why the Terra Nova Bay is important for scientists, and the science value, what I learned, is related to many different research fields, such as marine and coastal ecosystems, because the biodiversity of the region, which include various habitats for various species, include Adeline penguins, Weddell seals, krill, because of glaciology, because of climate science, geology, geophysics. And again, because of this scientific relevance, at the moment we have many research activities happening in the region. We have research stations, such as has been already mentioned, Mare Zucchelli Station, Jambogo Station from 2014, and Qinling Station, the Chinese one, which was established in 2024. I'm touching on these 2 points because these research station ASPAS, because it's something relevant also to my research field, which is international relations, and how these 2 things are actually have been associated with unique expression of territoriality within the region for a different level, of course. And when establishing research stations, we know that the Antarctic Treaty System does not provide any zoning prohibition to establish research station. To establish research station in Antarctica is a state-driven process, which goes, of course, through the process to the ATCM mechanisms and to the creation of the environmental impact assessment and all this stuff that we all know in this room. During the International Geophysical Year and before the treaty's establishment, climate states have located their research station within the territorial claims. But non-climate states, such as the US, Russian Federation, have established and located the research station in different regions because of several factors which are related to scientific cooperation that has been established with partners. But what are the platforms that actually facilitate this cooperation? COMNAP is one of them, as Professor Gino has already highlighted. The Council of Managers of National Antarctic Program facilitate cooperation between actors in the region in terms of information sharing, in terms of best practices development, providing expertise forum, and collaboration on projects. But what could be done more from the COMNAP in terms of harmonizing national programs between these actors? Because the COMNAP does not have the authority actually to dictate what are the research, what kind of research activities can be done within the region. And we know that COMNAP is voluntary based, so it depends on national intention actually to join and to develop guidelines together. And also there is an imbalance, of course, between the states and the capacity of national programs elaborated by state parties to the ATCM. So this is something that we should reflect about the mandate of the platform that actually exists, even if we know that COMNAP mainly relates to logistics. And then we come to ASPAs. ASPA, I think they are very important because when creating ASPA, we see this science policy interface that we have been discussed a bit. I think it's very, how to say, it's kind of a mirror actually to understand how science and politics are interlinked. Because we know that ASPAs are negotiated upon scientific advice, which is elaborated by scientists. And this kind of knowledge is provided to the policymakers that actually negotiate to the creation of ASPA. There are two ways of creating this knowledge, which could be linear. So we have the scientists producing the science and providing this knowledge to the policymakers, but we can have also the co-productive knowledge, where we have scientists and policymakers working together, and also the partners working together to produce knowledge to establish the values that have to be protected under the management plan of the ASPA. In the region, we have three different ASPAs. ASPA 171, 176, and 178. The ASPA 178 is the only one which is co-managed by the three parties, by China, Italy, and South Korea. And what I've done with my research is actually to look at the process of negotiation, of creation of the management plan, and through interviews with people that were involved in the process. And I'm still trying to understand which kind of model of knowledge has been applied, if we could see through this linear model or a co-productive model. What I found out so far is that, at least to my understanding at the moment, is that the scientific activities within the ASPAs are mainly regulated and follow national research programs. And data sharing consists more on informing the partners of what every party and every state is doing in the ASPAs, rather than actually producing knowledge together, discussing what kind of knowledge, what kind of science needs to be done in the area. So in this point, I think that something could be done more in terms of establishing what are the priorities and working together to actually develop research methods, because as Stephen actually was highlighting, diversity helps in this process. So diversity of research methods, discussing how to do that, what kind of things we should research on, would be an added value within these mechanisms. So yeah, these are my 2 points. So how do we actually facilitate harmonization of national programs through the existing platforms such as ComNAP, and how and if, because this is my opinion, and how we and whether the co-production model of knowledge could actually reinforce the research cooperation within mechanisms such as ASPA, which are very relevant and could be very fruitful in terms of proceeding with research cooperation. And I would like to stress this point because much of the literature actually focused on how also the 75, if I'm not wrong, 75 existing ASPAs at the moment are quite unrepresentative of the continent's biodiversity and different ecosystems. So should we go ahead with the establishment of ASPAs, or should we change the way we design ASPA? Should we include also evaluation process during the design of ASPAs? These are the points that I would like to make. Not only, of course, in Terra Nova Bay, but something that I highlighted in Terra Nova Bay between these 3 actors. Thank you.
Okay. First, time-wise management. I don't want to eat into coffee break or panel 2, but considering that we have 5 panelists and panel 2 has 3 panelists, can we use a little more time? Okay, all right. Now, and then if I just give audience a chance to ask questions as they please, it will be just maybe not be a wise way of using time. Let me, can I ask in this way, like, let's say, in 2 areas, Rossi, where now many players are entering, also in the Antarctic Peninsula area where Chile is active with many partner countries, in that kind of areas where research is reasonably active and there are many players, can we try to develop a list of items or list of joint priorities for many countries, but maybe for different reasons, because some countries is very supportive of this kind of priority. Others are not feeling comfortable, so they are not necessarily in support of that, but in other ways quite against. Or anyway, can we develop a list of joint priorities and get them to reach the level of joint field activities or joint projects in such areas that have ramifications not just to the Antarctic Treaty, but other more global instruments, whether BB&J. For example, in that regard, ASPA may be a little too small, but if we can somehow tell many countries in the area, for example, MPA, so different countries. So that can be a way for many entities to be engaged. But how constructive that will turn out, I don't know. But can you? Okay, please.
Well, briefly, I think that there's already an existing opportunity to do so through the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, which facilitates science and interactions between nations. And with speaking to Evan Bloom's position, for example, a case he raised was the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and its information conveyed through the IPCC process. Of course, what will happen in the peninsula region and down the West Antarctic with the West Antarctic ice sheet, for example, and of course then in turn what will happen with the Ross Sea are both really important and encapsulated in the scientific research program called INSTANT in SCAR, which is about essentially the ice sheet and sea level rise and its effect on civil society, which is a really important question. So I think those mechanisms exist, and it's worth exploring them further through SCAR, which in turn has a very open process for encouraging facilitation of science either regionally or by scientific question or in a variety of ways. So I think the question you pose is a really important one, and a mechanism does exist for whoever would like to take it up to do so.
I saw Evan first.
Also.
No,
Please.
Okay, very quickly then. So I think that if we leave it to the scientists to think about research priorities in particular, they'll do a very good job. The problem is that there are other people, including diplomats and policy people, who then get involved. And so what we have as an example is the difficulty at CAMLR with establishing a research and monitoring plan for the Ross Sea MPA and the other MPAs. Because it's not just a question of listing priorities, it's a question of adding in other political factors which have some favorability when it comes to certain delegations, and then things kind of stop. And so I do trust the scientists to make those questions. The other part is budgetary, so we're going back to the countries themselves. It's hard for them to commit, at least that was true for the US in the past, to long-term commitments of certain priorities because you don't know your budget so many years out. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. So I'll stop there.
I agree that budget and how projects are financed is a problem, because in Italy we have the Ministry of Research and University that found us our project, the national program, and so there are calls every 2 years, more or less, and so you don't have all this possibility to I mean, you don't have many years of research assured in your program, but I think that the problem is to combine the geopolitical and political level and the decision-making level with the researchers and scientists, because we also have scientific frameworks that are quite enlarged and like Antarctica and Sync, that it started in 2024, and it's a big program led by Germany that it's about having measures and sharing data all over Antarctica on all the mediums, so water, air, ice, and so on. And also I think that a big opportunity to find a way to join scientific level with political level, it will be the international polar year, that it's not the real near, it will be in 2032 and 33, but I think that will be a moment where we have time to build something that could be shared and that could be could join the scientific level and the political level.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's undeniable that the mechanisms are already in place. It's a matter. It could be a matter of making good use of already available mechanisms. But I don't need to defend myself. But let's say it just came to my mind that it's not just give scientists a shopping list. Do this, do this. So somehow externally developed priority. Also, it's not just leaving scientists to choose what they want and do something that is interesting to the eyes of scientists, but somehow generate a list of very worthwhile things to study in somewhat interactive way, and also somewhat designed and inducive way, so that if there is a case of success with some disciplines, areas, on topics, then we can get it to the level of very large international efforts, campaigns, and with some forward-looking timetable, such as 2033 or something. Okay, now maybe I cannot just pass without giving opportunity to the floor, so may I entertain a question or two from the floor, if there is anyone who would like to ask questions?
Thank you. I have a question for Evan.
Thanks a lot.
So how do you assess, I mean, your personal opinion, an Antarctica treaty system with less US involvement? Thank you.
So, how do I assess the treaty system with, I will say, the potential for less US involvement? I think that's certainly, if there is less U.S. involvement, I think it's a real shame. I would, of course, think it's a real shame. I think things have not quite settled yet, and I know there are a lot of expectations, including as more budgetary decisions are made by the Trump administration, that looks like certain types of science will be constrained, in particular. The question about the logistics profile of the U.S. program seems to be less budget cutting in that context, at least what it looks like right now, subject to what's going on in Congress and all of that. So it isn't, I don't expect a complete withdrawal of U.S. participation. But what I fear is that there is going to be lack of certainty for, particularly with respect to long-term projects over time, implications for young and medium-term scientists who, will not understand whether this is a good career direction to take. But then, of course, there's being the cutback on research funding throughout the United States, and it's not just polar issues, it's a wide variety of others. Climate science, of course, has been cut back significantly. So the dimension of that I focus on as well is what are the political implications, and people ask that. I think it's too early to say. It's a longer term question. It's not the question of political influence in Antarctica isn't just, this week or that week. it's spread out over time, and it's by comparison to other leading Antarctic nations. The U.S. will still have a large footprint, even after all, a year from now. It just will be, the trajectory is not going to be as it has been for some decades.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Greenhold. I'm the Belgian ambassador to the North and South Pole. Thank you very much for your interventions, and my apologies for arriving late. So that's about the concept of science and the fact that one can, and in many other parts of the globe, so we do that for science reasons. We do more and more research, which is of dual use, meaning science and business. For some countries, for example, sometimes fishing, some kind of fish is considered as for science. But the amount of fish which is recorded, which is taken in this way, is quite sizable. Do you think that the same kind of, looking into the future, the same kind of situation could arise in the Antarctic, or has arisen in Antarctic? By this sense, I mean that we do have people who drill a lot in Antarctic for the time being. Is this for just scientific reasons, or is there some kind of other reasons as well? So we will have a lot of new players in the next 5 to 10 years in Antarctic, probably, and rightly so. How are we going to settle that and to control that without changing the system, at least a little bit, to adapt to the new situation? So 2 questions. New players, and is most probably just the beginning right now. The second thing is that what is science, and where does that stop science, a definition of science, and when it stops science to become something else? Thank you. And I know it's $1 million question.
I think Steve was one line.
I can't answer all of your questions because some of them are legal questions and I'm not a legal scholar, and I would defer to my colleagues who are more experienced in that area. I would say that this question of, what is science and what is not science has come up previously and ends up being a bit of a legal question anyway, because if you thought of the whole discussion of scientific whaling, that's one where you could look into the history of how that's been done and what the outcomes have been. As somebody who's looked after the main science facilitation and advice body for the Antarctic, the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, for 5 years as president, there was no indication whatsoever that research was being done for some other purpose, that there was drilling for another purpose. There's certainly, as a great example, the European core that's 1.2 million years old of an ice core that is being analysed. That's a core. It was done for scientific purposes. It will be immensely useful to understand our past and therefore to help project the future under climate change. There's certainly been rock drilling to the sediment. The sediment gives you a further record. And of course, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm incorrect, my colleagues are more from the legal perspective, is of course there's no, you cannot exploit minerals in the Antarctic as a consequence of the protocol, but you certainly can undertake geophysics that looks at what's there, because that's just scientific research that's having a look at how the area is structured, what the resources of the area look like, and so on. And I would say that that's perfectly plausible science to do. It's done elsewhere as well. So, my view from a science perspective is that the science is done in the Antarctic at the moment to understand the region and to understand the region in the Earth system. And I think if new players came on board, there's sufficient mechanisms already within the provisions of the Antarctic Treaty System to actually have a look at what they intend and then to make a decision, as is done through the current mechanisms, about whether it should proceed or not. So my concern is much less about that, but I think that it's always wise to ask for detail, and of course that there's that ability to be done within the Antarctic Treaty System too.
both in terms of science and technology, and also position of countries. Yeah, there's a gray line in between science and technology, and one issue could be, I mean, natural resources and mineral resources, of course, whereas, as Steve correctly said, I mean, instruments can tell you a lot about basic science, but also about some resources. But on the other hand, biotechnology, for example, and I think it's good for the advancement of science and the welfare of our planet and human beings in the sense of extremophiles, for example, and some medicines that could benefit from. But you have to be careful in this gray zone and not to extract and go against the provisions of the environmental protocol. And in this sense, I would just like to stress that our country, Chile, is totally committed to preserve the protocol in 2048, when it could be revised if there's a majority of countries that would like to revise it. We will strongly promote the continuation of all the Antarctic treaties.
Yeah.
So very quickly, you know, it's interesting because when you talk about dual use in sort of academic and research circles, normally that discussion is about whether technology is being used for a military purpose. And you're focusing on something that's slightly different, and I appreciate that. So, for example, are there loopholes related to fishing where a certain amount of fishing is being done, in essence, for a commercial purpose, even though it was allowed for a scientific reason? And there is some of that tension within CAMLR. My sense is that, by and large, that has been handled relatively collegially. There are always questions about, well, so this company from New Zealand is going and they're going to make money to do this, and then they're going to, you know, doing it for a scientific purpose. How does all of that balance out? But there are particular rules about how much that takes place, and I think, by and large, that it hasn't been something that states have been particularly concerned about. On the question of the mining ban, there is the issue of whether some sort of research is thinking to a future where the ban might go away for some reason or another, and then a country may be well placed to act, and which would be, you know, quite unfortunate. At the same time, right now, countries are adhering to the ban, and it doesn't seem that there are any serious commercial quantities of minerals being taken out of Antarctica, and so it's more of a theoretical problem, in my view, than it is a real concern.
Okay, let me try to summarize, because I feel obliged to. Okay, well, indeed there are new instruments that have been not known to Antarctic Treaty System, but there is no reason for us to think that the interaction will be negative. It would be manageable size. It wouldn't be unmanageably too large. And it could be actually opportunities for very collaborative interaction. And with regard to science, however you define your science, however you want your science to be used, science will continue to remain as a backbone for decision making. And of course, you need to do high quality science. Nonetheless, the cost of indecision or inaction can be uncontrollably large. So still you have good reason to use your science for your best possible decision making. That's how I would wrap up and stop here.